the new Supra, a true high-performance sports car in the best Toyota tradition. Although the previous Supra was essentially a derivative of the Celica, the new Supra was developed from the ground up as a true sports car in its own right.
Hey guys, Chris here. Welcome back to the channel, and today we have a special episode for you. We're going to do a review on the 1988 Supra because we've had about 10 episodes on this build so far, and I'm about ready to pull out the 7M so I can get ready to swap in the 1JZ VVTi. I am so excited. We've made a lot of progress on this build so far, but we're ready to move on. I've owned this car since 2014, and I daily drove it for about a year and a half, from 2014 to around 2015. After that, it kind of just sat. I lived in Phoenix for a year and it sat in the Phoenix sun. And once I moved to Texas, it still sat even after I bought my garage. I really just didn't do anything with it for a long time. But I'm really ready to start daily driving this car. I'm really excited about what this engine is going to do for it. So that's going to be an exciting next chapter for this build.
The new interior has a sporty feeling, yet features outstanding quality, which creates a comfortable and enjoyable cabin environment.
So the first part I want to talk about is the interior. This is sort of my favorite part about the car as well as my least favorite. Now some people are really hit or miss about the interior. I love it because of the seats. The seats are like super comfortable. I really like the styling, the all blue styling and inside the car. Like I said, it's hit or miss for a lot of people, especially on the red ones are like super like 80s. I guess that's the only way I can describe it, but it's just a lot of the same color. I don't mind it, especially on the blues and the grays. I love it because the seats are really comfortable. After having driven the 2016 FRS and the 2020 Supra, these are by far the most comfortable seats out of the three cars. It's also one of the parts that I really don't like about the car is that it's super heavy. The driver's seat is power and it's like 70 pounds or something. The passenger seat is no lightweight as well. It's probably, I think, like 40 or 50 pounds. I will have to possibly replace them if I want to meet my weight reduction goal. I really want to get down to 3,000 pounds. So as far as space in here, the back seats give a little bit more space than my FRS. Not much, but I think it does make a difference, especially since it's a hatch as well. I feel like there's a little bit more headroom. A lot of people on the FRS, when they sit down and you go over a bump, you kind of hit your head on the top. Well, the steering wheel I actually like. It's kind of big as far as compared to what modern cars have, and also kind of thin. Mine is of course super faded, and I really want to get another steering wheel that's the same one but in better condition, or I wonder if there's anybody that restores these. I have no idea how I would be able to do that myself, but I really like this style of steering wheel. Now the gauges I have are the analog ones. I think if you have a JDM vehicle, they had the option to have the digital gauges. I don't think the US vehicles had that option, but you can see that it's pretty much your standard gauges from here to here. Some gauges that you don't see on other types of vehicles all the time, you have your voltage gauge as well as your oil pressure. This climate control panel is notorious on the Supras for braking on the tabs. In one of my past episodes, I did kind of fix the tab. When the tab broke, it was kind of just falling over and wobbly, and I don't think maybe it's really just a Supra thing, but maybe just more of an old car thing. Things like that are gonna break. When I bought this car, it didn't have the factory radio, it just had like an aftermarket CD player. I want to get the factory cassette player. I know it's gonna add some weight, but I really just want to run with that for a while just so I can, you know, listen to some cassette tapes. I'm really looking forward to that for some reason. In one of my past episodes, I replaced all the leather. This color is slightly different than the factory color. It actually blends really well with this color here. So I think that this is a good choice. And I also put on this aftermarket shift knob just to replace the worn out old one. Aside from that, the only other thing that I wanted to bring up in the interior was the rear hatch. The hatch is really heavy because of that big glass. So those hatch shocks do go out after some time. But other than that, the hatch is great. To me, it's real big. There's a lot of space in there to store stuff. When you fold the seats down, it's amazing.
The muscular and dynamic styling of the new Supra incorporates hidden pillars and flush-fitting panels throughout and is at the cutting edge of today's automotive design.
Now, as far as the exterior, I really love this exterior. I mean, obviously I'm biased because it's my car, but I have just grown to love this style. And I've looked at other 80s cars, specifically hatches with pop-up headlights, and this is just my favorite. I don't know why, but the lines are just so classic. And I really like the ones without the spoiler. Not a big fan of the saw blades for two reasons, just the design, but also they're just really heavy. So one thing that's just kind of weird is these headlight washers. I don't know, I kind of like them, but they're also just kind of like extra weight. At the same time, I don't want to remove them. I don't know, they kind of give this like a unique 80s type of thing. I don't see this on cars today. Compared to other A70 Supras, I really prefer the early models with this kind of open grille here. This just kind of, to me, is more 80s, whereas that later one, of course, they were trying to round it out a little bit more, and it kind of led into the 90s a little bit better, of course, but to me, this is just a classic look here. So not sure if you guys can see, but there's like tons of fading here. There's also some fading up here already, right here, as well as tons on the hood. I really need to get this resprayed. Yeah, there's some right here too.
A high-performance chassis that offers precise handling and outstanding stability.
So the next thing I want to talk about is the suspension. This car rides really kind of soft and very comfortable, actually. It's not like your typical sports car of today that are very crisp, very firm. This thing does have a little bit of body roll. It's just meant to be more of a comfortable car. It's almost very Lexus-like. So my car does come with the Sport package, which was actually rare for a non-turbo. What that included was the TEMS suspension, as well as the limited slip differential. So with the TEMS, you can actually put it from normal to sport mode. With the push of the buttons are right here below the shifter. And putting it in sport mode, I think this pretty much firms up the shocks. And I think it does something with the steering as well. Yeah, I mean, there's like a slight difference you can tell. There's also an indicator on the dashboard that tells you when TEMS kind of goes in its different stages. I really kind of like this feature only because it's unique. Like, not a lot of cars had electronically controlled suspension at that time. So I kind of want to keep it, but there's really not a lot of shocks that are compatible with it anymore. There is a company in Japan that I think still sells them, but like in the US, it's really, really hard to find. You have to find pretty much a used set. So it's common to replace the rear subframe bushings just because of the age of the car. I think mine are going out because it kind of feels a little like juddery. Is that a word? Jittery? Kind of harsh in the back, and it didn't really feel like that all the time since I've owned it. So I think the bushings may be going out on the rear subframe. I'm hoping the rear subframe isn't cracked or anything. I've heard of that happening for a few people with the A70s. Other than those few cases, the subframes are pretty solid. So that's one of the pluses I think about this car, that they build it so well.
At the heart of the Supra is the new 3-litre twin-cam 24-valve 7M GE unit, one of the most advanced normally aspirated 3-liter engines currently available.
So obviously I'm changing out this engine for the 1JZ. One of the things that actually sparks a lot of debate in the Mark III, the 870 Supra community is whether to go 7M or JZ swap. There's fewer and fewer people that are sticking with the 7M. There's some really good builds that I've seen with 7Ms, but most of the time people are opting to go with a 1JZ or a 2JZ. So a couple of things I wanted to mention about the 7M GE, the non-turbo 7M engine, which is what I have. A lot of people don't really mess with the 7M GE, and I'm another one, of course, but this engine actually has been pretty good for me, and I'll tell you why. Both the 7M GE as well as the 7M GTE suffered a really big mistake from the factory, which is the head bolts were not properly torqued at production. I think pretty much for all of them. That really causes an issue with head gasket leaks. Personally, I've never experienced that on my engine. So one of two things happened. Either one, the previous owner or one of the previous owners already had it changed, or two, it just doesn't really show up as much on the non-turbos because there's not as much distress on the engine. So that kind of, both of those kind of play a factor in my situation. I only had like very slight oil leaks. I've had an oil leak on the center of the valve covers, which is a pretty common thing. But other than that, no real major oil leaks on the car. So I'm thankful to not have experienced the head gasket issue, but that is an issue. So if you are planning to build up the 7M, just look out for that. Make sure that you're properly torquing your head bolts. You may want to consider getting the head decked. Use a good head gasket and ARP head studs. There's not really a lot of options with building up the 7M GE as a non-turbo build. There's a few people that have done it, and I actually am considering doing that with the old engine, just kind of mess around with it. But I've seen just a few non-turbo builds. I've seen actually one guy, I think in Australia or somewhere, who did a high compression 7M GE. He really looked like he knew what he was doing. There's not really any support for building it non-turbo. There's lots of options for building it up as a turbo build. So the 7M is still supported. There's still some places that provide parts as well as tuning and stuff like that.
In terms of outright performance, the Supra's maximum speed leaves the rest of the competition standing. Furthermore, the acceleration from 0 to 60 miles an hour compares very favorably with the best in its class.
The W58 transmission is actually, to me, it's been reliable. It's been very reliable. I've not had any issues with it whatsoever. I also don't really race or abuse my car though. I haven't really done that. But I've owned this car for 7 years and I've driven it in all sorts of different conditions. As far as the Toyota World, the W58 is supposedly not as strong as the R154, the one that I'm going to be putting into this car. The transmission on its own, just in this car, in a 7M, whether it's a GE or even if you put it in a GTE swap, this actually is a pretty good transmission. It's pretty reliable up to a certain point. On an older car like this, older transmission, sometimes you have to put it into first or second before being able to go into reverse. On this car, reverse is over to the right and down. But yeah, sometimes it doesn't go in and you'll just have to put it in first or second, get off the clutch, get back on the clutch, and then put it in.
Thanks to Toyota's advanced technology, the quality of the new Supra is also outstanding.
So the next thing I want to talk about is quality and reliability. This is a 30-year-old car, so just keep that in mind. You're going to have issues with any 30-year-old car. Just like I said earlier, the head bolt torque was not right from factory. That is one of those things that on the 7M is just really poor on the reliability. These cars are known for random starting issues. It could be one of many things. It could be the starter itself, it could be the ignition switch, it could be the wiring, the starter relay. There's just all these issues that just come up. On the dashboard, there's actually a light that tells you if one of the tail lights are out, and there's a little yellow box near the tail lights that makes this work. That is known to have issues. There's a mod that you can do where you can actually jump some of the wires in that system. I might link it in the description down below. People just call it the fail box. So there's a fail box eliminator mod. There's also like a fail box eliminator piece that you can actually buy that someone makes that does that for you. But really it's just a simple jumping of a couple wires, so you can do it yourself. Most of this stuff is just going to be due to age. You know, there's not a lot of issues that come up on this car that are just unique to the Supra. Wow, it is really hot here in Texas. I think it was close to 100 today. So the last thing I really wanted to touch on is just kind of an other category. Things I didn't really think about when I bought this car. I really wasn't looking for a Supra when I bought this car. You might hear that when people say like, hey, why didn't you just buy a Mark IV? Well, obviously Mark IVs are super expensive, but I wasn't looking for a Mark III or a Mark IV when I was buying this. I was just looking for a car, a sporty car, and this came up. I kind of have this feeling of slight jealousy of the people with Targa tops. I really want a Targa top. At the same time, I don't want to give up on this specific car because I've just had so much experience in this car, just, you know, owning it for so long and driving it across the country. It's one of those things as a car owner, you really just build a connection with your car. As much as it goes through, as much of the negatives you see, like you just build a connection with it. But if I was choosing a car now, I would probably go with the Targa. Some people prefer the hardtop because there's less chassis flex, it's lighter weight. But other people prefer the Targa because it's just that experience of having that open top is really awesome. But you do have to deal with possible leaks, you do have to deal with possible chassis flex. It's really hot outside. I am glad to be back in here. It was just starting to get hot, so I just decided to come home. I could finish the rest of this video inside the garage. The last thing I wanted to mention that kind of goes in the other category is the weight of the car. This car is a little bit heavier than a Mark IV Supra. I mentioned earlier the front and rear subframes. Those are just like on any rear-wheel drive car, that's going to cause it to be heavier than a front-wheel drive car. But some of the other things that make it real heavy are the wheels, the front seats, and the soundproofing under the carpet. So just keep that in mind if you're in the market for like a sports car or something like this, a project car, that it's gonna be real heavy. At 3460, I believe the non-turbo ones were. That's kind of crazy because to me, like weight is a big factor, but I have this like big heavy beast right here. All right guys, that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching this review. I really wanted to do this to just kind of have one last drive in the 7M and really feel it. I didn't really get on the highway or really punch it. I did the other day though, so a couple days ago I did drive it around and just kind of did a little bit of a peel off around a corner. That's one other thing that I didn't mention is that it's still kind of light-ish in the rear end, and 200 pound-feet of torque is enough to break loose those rear wheels. So with that out of the way and the first 10 episodes of this series behind us, the next thing I'm gonna do is just take a couple shots of the engine bay before I pull out that 7M, which is gonna start this weekend. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
The new Toyota Supra. The combination is irresistible.